Well, 30 years ago, David Ireland experienced a defining moment at a grocery store. He noticed the diversity of all the shoppers, and then he heard the voice of God. Today, he's the pastor of a multiracial congregation with over 40 nationalities. Take a look.
David Ireland is the pastor of Christ Church, a culturally diverse congregation of 9,000 members in northern New Jersey. When he was 10 years old, his home was firebombed.
Our family was one of the first black families to move into this section of Queens, New York, called Rosedale. And for the next 6 months, we had round-the-clock surveillance because of the death threats that followed.
In his book, One in Christ, David shares how God healed him from the wounds of racism. And he gives practical tips on having healthy, cross-cultural relationships.
Please welcome back to the 700 Club, David Ireland. David, great to have you back on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, Wendy. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, tell us what happened to you and your family when you were just 10 years old and how it affected you.
My family had migrated from Jamaica, and I came a couple of years after that. And at age 10, when we moved into this home in Rosedale, Queens, New York, within 2 weeks of us living there, the house was firebombed. I was actually in the rear bedroom window, and I saw this explosion take place. As it hit the window, it was a Molotov cocktail.
Was anybody hurt?
No one was hurt. The 5 white teenage boys threw this Molotov cocktail at the window to destroy the house. But we had to have round-the-clock police surveillance for at least 6 months. 24 hours a day.
What year was this, David?
This was back in the late, the early 70s, I should say.
Wow.
The early 70s. And so the boys were caught and nothing happened to them. The police department said it was just childish prank. And so it was a different era that back then.
But you were 10. How did that affect you?
I had no concept of racism. I came from the island nation of Jamaica. Right. I didn't know what race meant. I had no idea. And on top of that, I was 10 years old. So I had not had any formation about the difference between white, black, Latino, Asian. I had no concept whatsoever.
Yeah.
But my parents were very protective of us to not form any kind of racist mindset and perspective. And so they hid from us all the letters that they would get afterwards. Hate mail saying we would have killed you, those kinds of things.
Oh, my.
In fact, we had an above-ground pool in the backyard. And, the year after we got the house, my parents took up the pool. I'm wondering, why did they take it up? And they planted a flower garden there. And it was not until I was an adult that my mother said to me, the reason why we took up the pool was because we were afraid that neighbors would pour acid in the water to create harm and danger. So we took it up for that reason. So they shielded us a lot. But the defining moment for me was when I came to faith in Christ at age 20, Wendy.
You were in a grocery store.
I was in a, that was a little bit afterwards. When I came to faith in Christ, my heart was changed. But when I planted Christ Church, I was 24 years old. My wife was expecting our first child, married 2 years at the time. And she asked me to go to the store to buy some items for her. I don't recall what those items were, but I do know.
Pickles,
I wanted
ice cream.
those kinds of things, odd combinations of food. I took one of those little red hand baskets, and I was walking down the aisle. I got to one aisle, put my hand on the item, put it in the basket, and I happened to look up at the end of the corridor. And I saw the very stark reality, whites, blacks, Asians, Latino. I saw biracial people. And for the first time in my life, I heard the audible voice of God. Now, our church is only 2 weeks old. I had no vision for the church. I didn't even know I needed a vision. I couldn't even spell church. I was 24 years old. And so the Lord said to me in that grocery store, David, why can't it be like that in my house?
Oh, my.
And I started weeping uncontrollably. And I'm not a
weeper.
The grocery store. In the grocery store. A lot of things were odd. First thing that was odd is that Jamaica was colonized by the British, so my culture is very British. So I don't show my emotions publicly. Second thing, my science background. If you ever watch Star Trek, I'm the Vulcan. I'm the guy. Just give me the facts. And so here I'm weeping uncontrollably. I'm talking about it was messy. It was because what God did for me in that grocery store, he placed on me something that was troublesome to him about his church. Why is it that blacks and whites and Asians and Hispanics worship separately at the same time of the Sunday morning? Martin Luther King Jr. said 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings is the most racist hour in America.
Heaven's not going to be like that.
Yeah, and it's not. And so I wept because God placed on me something that he wanted me to do.
Well, Pastor, you are now the pastor of a 9,000-member congregation in northern New Jersey.
Correct.
And yet most church, very racially...
Yeah, we have about 70 different nationalities that's a part of our church. Yeah.
Yet most churches in America remain segregated.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I mean, only 3% of churches in America represent a diverse congregation. Diverse meaning at least 11% of the congregation is of a different racial makeup than the majority.
How can we change it?
We can change it several ways. It starts on a personal level. It can't be a corporate level, it's personal. If racism is a problem to someone, that means reconciliation must become a solution to that person. See, and the idea is that we have to then look at it in a personal, introspective way. And so I talk about coaching people. In fact, I was a cross-cultural coach with the National Basketball Association because basketball became an international sport. And so people are coming from different parts of the world to America in order to play basketball professionally. And so my job was to help players through the Rookies Transition Program, help players learn to get along with one another. And it starts off again personally. Personally, meaning that if I'm going to be racially attractive, I must make someone who's of a different race feel comfortable with me and in my presence because I'm comfortable with me. If I'm comfortable with myself, I'm going to then be able to project that comfort on the other person. And so it's going to create this sense of openness and this sense of support and trust when I'm in that person's presence.
Well, in your book, you write about the two main building blocks in bringing different people together. What are those blocks? I
look at the idea of having the right attitudes and also the right actions. Because when I went through even my dissertation on the black-white relationship in large multiracial churches in America, I'm going across the country, reading every book on this topic and adding to it, I found out that the churches that are cross-racial, that are multiracial in composition, when I did focus group studies, there were clearly reasons why races that were healthy, I should say relations that were healthy cross-racially is when they had right attitudes and right actions. Right attitudes represents things like, do I make you feel comfortable with me? Do I make you feel comfortable with you when you're with me?
Yes, you do.
And those are questions that we have to ask. Can I then, can I share my myths with you? Everyone has myths about other races, myths about people, myths about ethnic groups. And when a person feels comfortable with you, they can share their myths without the fear of rejection, because even if they say something foolish, you'll say, oh, that's silly, but let me tell you what you ought to do if you're going to create a healthy cross-race relationship.
Well, Pastor David, we have just scratched the surface. There's so much in here. His book is called One in Christ, and it's about bridging racial and cultural divides. It's so important. It's available wherever books are sold. You can hear more from David on our Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/700 Club. David, thanks for coming back and sharing this amazing testimony with us.
Thank you.